This episode of the Fine Homebuilding podcast is brought to you by Loctite's Tight Foam. The best builders take weatherization seriously. When they need to seal a gap that's too small for insulation but big enough to create a draft, they reach for Loctite's Tight Foam. With 3 formulations for everything from small cracks to the biggest gaps, there's a tight foam product for every job, including a low expanding product designed to seal the rough opening around windows and doors. The high-density foam forms a tenacious bond to most common building materials, stays flexible to prevent cracking when materials move, and keeps air, moisture, and pests out of the house. Builders who care about energy efficiency, comfort, and durability choose Tight Foam. Visit LoctiteProducts.com for more information.
The contractor that did all the main trades of the work, he said when he started construction back in the 70s, early 80s, it was customary to hand the new homeowners a box of cigars to smoke to help get rid of all of the new construction smell inside of the house.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. Like all you people at the Southeast Building Science Symposium, thanks so much for being here. Woo. This is a great crowd. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Please email your questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, threats to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. We are joined today by Nathan Shirai, Andy Steele, and Andrew Zellner. It is so great to be here in front of all you people who gave up your time to be at this awesome symposium. It is a career highlight for me, and I wanted to let you know all I got dressed up for the show because I wanted to step it up a little notch for the performance today. So thanks so much for being here. Thanks for sticking around after having the fire hose of building science information shot right at you. It shows a true commitment to stick around for the show, so thanks so much for being here. You know, Nathan, I think we should start with how did the Southeast Building Science Symposium come to be?
So the Southeast Building Science Symposium is the child of the firstborn child, shall we say, of the Midwest Building Science Symposium, which you might be able to think about as even a somewhat legitimate child of the Fine Homebuilding Summit of 2019. Is that fair to say? Travis is nodding yes. And what's cool about this event is that because we held it in the same hotel as where everybody is also sleeping and staying in, it really has a similar feel of that initial event in Southbridge, Massachusetts from 2019, which has been really fun to do. But the way that it got here, Travis and Joe Cook of Catalyst Construction have done an incredible job of building a really cool model for a 2-day building science event that they've been doing for the last 3 years in Kansas City. And so this year, Travis, who I've become buddies with through events like this and through Instagram and the BS and Beer Network, approached me about bringing it here due to what I'm told is an unusually high participation in our local building science and beer discussion group. And so I'm just grateful to be here. I'm grateful that you all are here, and it's just really cool to see that this is starting to happen more and more. There's other events in the works, but that's how we got here today.
And you're an insulation contractor in Chattanooga, is that right?
That's correct.
And how did you start drinking the Kool-Aid of these building science things?
So as an insulator, building science is really foundational to everything that we do and everything that our stuff touches in the building. And so really in the interest of trying to figure out my trade, I kind of just felt like I had to get more educated on how our stuff works, what it does, how it fails, what it can add, what it can subtract from the building. And so I began my building science journey through the Energy Vanguard blog.
Allison Bales, who was one of our presenters,
Yeah, which was fantastic. And this was, this is more than 10 years ago now. And that was my gateway drug into building science. And through that, he's the first place that I heard the name Joe Stebrick. And so that led me to buildingscience.com, and that led me to his fundamentals seminars and his renovation seminars. And shameless plug, it's one of my life goals now to get invited to summer camp as long as they're doing it. But I'm not going to push too hard on that.
I might know someone.
But, and then also Green Building Advisor came through that, and then just all the other resources that are out there, the podcasts and everything. So I've just been devouring this stuff for a long time. And but it was really coming back to the summit in 2019, that was a pivotal event for me because I was exposed to so much, not only great content, but also incredible people, and had the opportunity to meet and hang out with just all kinds of incredible folks who, you start relationships and you ask questions, and you just it just gets a lot more real and fun. So that's my building science story.
We'll come back to that a little more. Andy Steele is a Fine Homebuilding contributor. Andy, this is your first time being at one of these events. What brought you here, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, this is my first time here, and I do want to take just a second to thank Travis and Joe and Nate and everybody for putting this on. It's been a great event. I've really, really enjoyed it. I started going to shows like JLC Live, events like that, probably 2015, 2016, and, obviously COVID happened and all those things stopped. This was kind of the event that I've been looking for a long time. It focused a lot on building science, obviously, and it also gives you a chance to interact on a intimate level with the presenters, with people that you don't get to talk to every day. I mean, had lunch with Steve yesterday, and
Steve Basic,
yeah, after dinner conversation with him last night, and you got to hang out and have a beer, play ping pong, whatever, with these folks that you can learn so much knowledge from in this building science community. Some of it just validates things you're already doing. Some of it you're learning new techniques. It's a great opportunity to interact and just be a sponge for 48 hours.
It's a great event, and we should thank the sponsors who helped put it on for sure, because without their help, none of this would happen. It's been they have a wealth of knowledge too, and they're so giving of their time to explain new things. I harassed the guy from the Energy Conservatory about blower door numbers last night for at least a half an hour, and he was kind to indulge me, so that was cool. Andrew, do you want to talk a little bit about what was one thing today that really surprised you that you learned? Can I put you on the spot and ask you that?
Absolutely. Actually, the last presentation of the day, Enrico's passive presentation, was very active. And
hilarious.
Hilarious. Fantastic presentation. And diving into the modeling and the numbers, especially of the difference in triple pane window assemblies and where they are in the wall, was very eye-opening, especially at the level of passive where you're dealing with changes in numbers that may not seem big, but they're large percentage jumps.
And I think we're all led to believe that triple pane windows are all created equal, and his point was that they are definitely not.
They're definitely not, and you need to test them. We need to test them.
Yeah, I thought the location, whether it be an innie and outie or in the middle-y, was maybe a water management or an aesthetic choice. didn't even dawn on me that
the energy considerations of that choice.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think my big takeaway or wow moment was Enrico's showing a thermal bridge. My perception was a thermal bridge is limited to the bridge itself. Mm-hmm. But of course, the thermal bridge also has effect on the surrounding materials. So not only is the thermal bridge cold, but the materials in contact with it also are losing heat. And that was very eye-opening to me. I was like, wow, I never thought about that.
It's not just the bridge, it's the highway.
That's one of our pull quotes, right?
Yeah.
All you on the podcast are just going to have to take our word for it that the visualizations were awesome.
Yeah.
I did get a couple of good pictures from Enrico's presentation that we can include with the podcast.
Do you have a wow moment, Nathan, you can remember?
Truthfully, I've been in and out a lot today with,
managing the show.
And also, just kind of checking the schedule of the show and all that. So unfortunately, I haven't gotten as much of the content as I wish I had. But I think, thinking back to Allison Bale's presentation this morning, just all of the all of the variables that go into indoor air quality. So Allison talked to us for a solid 2 hours, filling us in on all of the considerations that go into that. And it was really illuminating. And I guess I was just reminded how many things go into that. It's not just a one solution, one product, one strategy, one solution kind of thing. You really have to think of the entire system of the building to make impacts there.
Andy, did you have a wow moment?
Aside from wanting to go immediately home and tear my house down and start over. Yeah, I think my biggest kind of wow moment was Ben Bogey's correlation of indoor air quality and childhood asthma and how that affects millions and millions of people throughout the world, not just in our country and other countries as well, and what we can do to affect change on that.
You made the point in a private conversation that we had about...
That's now going public on the FHP podcast.
Yeah, well, it was just because we were just talking to each other. And you made the observation that folks who have lots of money can have good housing because they can afford it, but not everyone can. And oftentimes it's the kids who are suffering because of the moldy basement or the poor detailing on their house. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, we're not really here to talk about affordable housing, but I think we can all agree that high-performance building, particularly passive building, is not something that the majority of people can really afford in their daily lives. When you start thinking about it in terms of percentages, the people that can't afford it the most probably are the ones that could benefit the most from it, from the lower energy costs, lower operating costs of the building. But I think there's some details we can do as builders to focus on to get the most benefit in indoor air quality, in air tightness, follow that red line test, really nail down our air sealing details, get the house comfortable. Like Steve Basic likes to say, there's got to be something that's the worst part, and it's probably going to be your windows, because if you're trying to build something to a budget that maybe can't afford triple pane windows and you're going to stick with a double pane window, that's going to be the worst part, and you just have to accept that. I think coming away from the conference, that's kind of how I'm going to approach building and trying to sell these methods and means to clients, not from an energy efficiency standpoint. It's from a health and safety, from a comfort, from a livability standpoint.
That was one of the things a few folks mentioned, was they don't sell high performance, they sell comfort.
It's easier to understand being comfortable than it is high performance, right? Like if you're sitting in front of a cold window, that's easy to understand. If you're looking at energy bills over 10 years, then you're having a conversation with your builder about a project. That's harder to figure out, right?
Absolutely.
I wanted to open our show now to questions from the floor, if anyone had it. And in order to encourage participation, we have some pretty awesome prizes. We have a pretty good house book. We have some $50 gift cards from Tyvek. We have some lovely stainless steel tumblers from, is it Huber?
Folks at Huber, yep.
Yeah. So anyone want to ask a question? Travis, what's your question?
I'm curious what you guys would say after being through this, what I consider to be a pretty special event. What do you feel like is still the greatest barrier remaining to adoption? Like, we have all the information, we have all the tools, we know what needs to happen to make our buildings better. What do you guys feel like is still the greatest remaining hurdle that we have to clear to solve these problems, to make these better assemblies? What can we do to help people get into action?
That's a great question.
Well, I'll bite. I think the point that you're making is that we as builders and tradesmen can come and get this information, and we can grasp the value of it from a conceptual level and understand why it's worth doing. and really want to sell that value to our clients, but the disconnect comes in convincing that client why it's important in terms that they can relate to and value themselves. And or, just, well, I guess I would say creating the demand in the market that would drive that adaptation from the providers of that value. Is that a fair encapsulation of that question? So I think that's what it comes down to. And I wonder if that's a component that we might consider adding to future events is, okay, now that we've seen all this, now that we've seen the why, the what, and the how, how can we get this into the hands of the people that are really going to benefit from it, which is the people whose homes that we are touching. And so I don't know the real answer to that, but I'll tell you that one of our local BS and Beer Group members, his name's Michael Walton, and he runs an organization called Green Spaces here in town, which is really cool stuff that they're doing. He had a brilliant idea to create a highlight reel from this event of the top, 5 takeaways that we wish we could see get into every new home being built today, and rent a booth at the upcoming home show and staff the booth with BS and Beer Group members and start getting that information out into the minds of the consumer to say, oh, you mean my home can actually make me feel better? You mean my home can impact my health in some way? You mean my home can not be a place that I just have to put a sweater on when I'm not comfortable anymore? And start to maybe percolate into that soil a little bit, and then force the market to then adapt to the demand that's created that way. So who knows how effective any of that would be, but I think that it comes down to finding ways to get the outcomes into the minds of the people that have to then live with those outcomes so that they can then desire and ask for those outcomes so that we can then execute those outcomes.
Well, from a builder's perspective, I think in terms of getting other builders on board with it, coming to an event like this and seeing slides and seeing people who have executed these details talk about how they executed the details and training their subs in executing the details is not as complicated as it sounds on paper, right? The red line test is not hard to do. It's not difficult. They can change just slightly their process. And I think convincing other builders and demonstrating to them how really relatively simple it can be will go a long way in giving builders the confidence to try to help push this forward with their clients as well.
We should tell folks who may be listening and are unfamiliar, the red line test is the one pioneered by Joe Steebrook that identifies the air barrier on a set of plans. He suggests that you should be able to use a pen to draw the air barrier, and it should be clear.
If you have to lift your pen, you don't have a continuous air barrier, and that's where you need to focus some attention, right?
What about you, Andrew?
I think, as builders, building enthusiasts, tradespeople, we love to talk about the process of how it's done. We get a little bit into why it's done from a practical standpoint. I feel like a lot of it, though, comes down to sort of like the business side of the building business, being able to talk to your clients in a way that they understand, help them understand that it's not, your budget doesn't stop when your building is finished. Your budget continues for as long as you're within that building. I think also there is going to be more public awareness of building science, especially over the next 10 years with the money from the Inflation Reduction Act. I think the climate's going to drive a lot of adoption of building science. We've started to see it in Florida and wildfires in Colorado, indoor air quality. And as much as painful as that is, I think that's going to be a big driver of it and drive a lot of the adoption, which will hopefully drive down costs a little bit, and affordability gets into the equation too. And I think the other thing, Americans are fiercely independent, and getting folks to embrace the code and what the code is about. I thought Glenn's presentation was super inspiring. Codifying a lot of these things too, I think is going to drive that conversation much more than any individual builder can, or even the builders in this room can.
Glenn's observation was that the code is for the people, by the people, and written by the people. So if you're not participating in the code process, you're letting someone else do it, and they may or may not have the same goals that you do. And if you want to change that, you need to get involved in the process. Do any of you out there want to comment on your thoughts to Travis's question? How do we get this stuff to be more mainstream? Anyone got a volunteer response? That'll get you a gift card, I guarantee it.
There's $50 in it for you.
$50, come on.
Other
Halloween's coming up.
than we should start teaching building science in grade school.
Right.
How do you do that?
Travis already does that. How do you do that, Travis?
So
Travis said,
anyone
I think, you're serious. You said we should be teaching building science in grade school.
Yeah, we have to start them much younger because kids are making decisions. Honestly, their parents are making decisions for them at a very early age about they're going to go to college, they're going to be exposed to a legal career or a medical career. They're going to be the next great running back for the Titans. That's all kind of a mirage, in my opinion. And it, I think, hurts their future of our trades because we're not presenting to them, this is a really cool thing that we do. And it's pretty magical and it's pretty special. And it allows you to help people in a way that your doctors and your lawyers and your nurses and all the people that care for other people in our world, we get to care for our clients in that way and care for our society and our community in a way that's pretty special too. And we do that with building science because that's where comfort and health hit the rubber meets the road there. So that's why it has to happen in elementary school, because in high school, they've already decided where they're going to college. Their parents have already taken them on 3 college visits in middle school based on the elite soccer program that they've been in for 4 years. So that's why we're starting in our elementary schools locally. And in terms of how do you do that, you quite literally send an email to the teacher and say, hey, I know you were going to show a movie on Friday afternoon. Would it be okay if I talk about how heat moves for 30 minutes? It's that easy. That's all it took me to get in the door. And it helped that I have kids in that school, so they knew I wasn't a weirdo. Well, how about not a creep? Maybe still a weirdo. But that's how you do that. If nobody has another question, I wanted to pose another question.
Lay it on us.
That's okay. And any too local, you got to be a local to this market to get this. If you were going to give these away based on the question. But my question was, Joe and I talked a lot, and with Nathan and with Cheryl and everyone involved in planning this event, about the linear path of the curriculum. And the intent was we start with Steve Basic, who's going to do control layers, which is high school physics meets the building world. And then we're going to talk about the 2 most important control layers. We'll start with Ben Bogey on water, because that's the most important one. And then we'll do air with Jake, because that's the second most important. And then, thank you, Dan, for that beer. You're the man. Then we'll do indoor air quality with Allison. The idea was that we're going to show this arc of this is available to you, builder. This is not complicated. This is not out of reach. And then we're going to go into, here's where you go from there. The code is already, the code-built house now is a marvel. And it's so much better than the code-built house 30 or 40 years ago. There's
Even
nobody
10.
advocating that.
Right.
So then do you see, I want to know if it landed. I want to know what we can do better, because we're going to do this in Austin, Texas in a month, and we're going to do it in DC, and maybe we're going to do it in Asheville next year, and maybe Portland, and everywhere that it's going to go. We're trying to make it better every time. I want to know what landed. Did we see that we're all on the same line? I don't want to get all time as a flat circle, but it kind of is. Did it land?
I don't know what that means.
Sorry.
He hadn't even
I
drank
want to
that
know,
beer yet.
did it land that code now is awesome and is so much better than how we were building 40 years ago? And Passive House now is not Passive House in 20 years. 20 years from now, Passive House is going to be unreal, things we haven't even thought of. So did that land, and what should we do better? What can we change to get there? And if you're local to Chattanooga and you supported this event, I want my question card to go to you. Thank you.
I will answer this because you and I have had this conversation in the staff meeting.
Yeah.
What I think I like most about the BS Science Symposiums is, as Travis suggested, it talks about the big picture with Steve Basic first. The very fundamentals of building science. Heat and water move from more to less. The red line test. And then we get into specifics on how to do these things, how to have a continuous air barrier, how to make sure water doesn't get in and around your windows, the very specifics on the hard parts. And I think that the show is set up so well that way.
I also think, when you hear building science, you're like, or high performance, it's like a concept that's not easy to grasp. But as soon as you have somebody who's done it and can explain it to you with the materials they use and show you pictures, it's so helpful. And it's like, it gets you in, someone could show up having never built a house to this event, and at the end you could walk away and be like, I've got to change my entire life.
Andy, what do you think about this? I'm curious, like your perspective as a builder. I mean, we don't know each other well, but like how much building science stuff have you digested to this point, and what of what you heard here this weekend do you feel like you're going to take home with you and all that sort of a thing? Like, did you see that arc developing that Travis was talking about?
I definitely did. I saw the arc. Maybe kind of towards the end of day one, I could see that the presentations were all building on each other. We talked very first thing about the importance of control layers and water, then air, then vapor, then thermal, in that order of importance. And then we worked through those, and I could see that playing out during the conference here. I think as far as something I'm going to take away to try to incorporate is more, I didn't realize, I guess, a lot of the practices I was already doing were checking several of these things off the list. It just seemed like the right thing to do, right? Like if you think about building a house and shedding water and how water flows and shingling things, it just makes sense. And then you go to flash a window and it's like, well, I need to flash more than just the pan. I need to flash the sides too, right? And it never dawned on me that I was incorporating the air barrier from the outside of my zip wall into the inside of my window, right?
The window's the air barrier, right?
Yeah, the window is the air barrier, yeah. So, but why would you tape that side too? Because it doesn't show that you have to tape that side in the drawings. But I was like, well, if I'm taping this, why wouldn't I tape that? And then why wouldn't I tape that? As long as you're not trapping water in and you're keeping air and water out. That was kind of an aha moment for me. I think one of the things I took away, and maybe it's something you can speak to, where I live in Climate Zone 5, building science is important. We have heat and cooling seasons. We don't have a BS and beer chapter. The closest one to me is 2 hours away, so that doesn't really make sense to drive 2 hours and talk about building science and drink beer and then drive 2 hours home. Is there a resource or something maybe we can put in the show notes for people to go if they want to start their own BS and beer chapter?
We'll do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, so to that I'll say, and for all of y'all listening right now, if you go to the Pretty Good House website, that book grew out of the building science and beer movement. And, the authors of that book, Dan, Emily, and Mike, and then I guess Chris as well, they're all part of that same BS and beer group, maybe the seminal BS and beer group. Can we call it that?
Founding, right?
Yeah. The progenitor.
You got to keep using these words, I don't know.
Their website, I'm pretty sure Mike developed some some resources just of like, here's what we found works and what doesn't, and here's some topics that we've covered. So I'm pretty sure you can go to that website and find a tab or something that gets you all that stuff. So.
Did you have a question, sir? Thank you.
A question and a statement. One of the presenters last night made the comment that mechanical suppliers or the providers of HVAC systems are lagging behind. And we are trying to perfect the enclosure, the envelope. We're building a thermos bottle and calling it a house. And the integration of the HVAC systems or the ERV or those kinds of things need to be represented at these activities.
The mechanical systems, absolutely, yeah.
And we need to get them on board. I would like to understand better what direction the integration of systems controls are going, whether the house is controlled by a small computer or you're relying upon microprocessors for discrete systems, and how do we make those things work together seamlessly so that one doesn't obliterate the benefits we're getting from the other system when they turn on or off.
Greg, give that man a Tyvek div card there.
Speaking of thermoses, here.
Woo-woo! Thank you.
Congratulations.
I think he's totally right. You can buy variable capacity heat pumps and air conditioners now, which I thought was a great innovation, but they come in 2 and 5 tons, right? It's like, that's not enough.
Or it might be too much.
It's too much.
Yeah.
I meant not enough choices, I guess. Yeah, you're right. It's too much in many cases, because we're talking about a house with so little load, and the stuff needs to run a long time to dehumidify, where you have moisture buildup. So I totally agree with you, sir. I think we need to be doing a better job with that.
I'm going to highlight Mr. Brant Taylor. I don't know if he's still in the room or not, but he makes the point a lot that every house is a custom house. Even if it's a spec house, it's still a custom house because you had to individually cut each framing member, you had to individually run each wire. And so in a manner of speaking, every house is a custom house. And so it gets tricky when you may have one house, even if they're the same floor plan, they might be put together by different crews, and they might vary slightly enough that...
The house is going to have a different siding. It's going to be potentially at a different elevation, even if you build it dozens of times, right?
Right. So maybe the same floor plan on this side of the street works this way, but then when that subdivision street takes a 90-degree turn, the same floor plan past that turn has a total different solar exposure, wind exposure, and so on and so forth. It gets a little tricky, but I would say that, the mechanical side of things, I would love to see some sort of a system that... I have an iPhone in my pocket. My iPhone ought to be able to control some piece of equipment that can sense exterior temperature, interior temperature, relative humidity, VOCs, CO2, all that stuff, and have it control some kind of a heat pump, dehumidifier, ventilator, filtration situation that could deliver optimum air quality and efficiency to my building without me having to even touch a thermostat. I feel like we have the technology for that, and I feel like the equipment, all the components are out there. We just need to kind of put them together in a way that can do that. I can't think that that's such a great leap. Now, it gets tricky because if every house is a custom house, you might need a slightly different, you might need a beefier dehumidifier for this side of the street than that side of the street or what have you. But I don't know. I've got to think that somewhere on the manufacturing side, we can come up with a product that can do all those things in a really, really effective way. I don't know. This is a little bit pie in the sky answer to your question, but... yeah.
Andy was saying earlier he would just like to see fewer dormers on his builds, right?
Nested gables and dormers on dormers. I think from a design aspect, we need to think about what houses look like. Like that house on the front, a pretty good house there. It's gorgeous.
A beautiful little house,
It's
right?
a beautiful house. If we can get more of that mainstreamed, more just simple designs. They're timeless, they hold up, they last.
Emily showed in her presentation a monster of a house with a monster of a roof, right? And her point was like, someone's going to have to fix this at some point, and someone's going to have to figure out a way to make it easy to heat and cool. And my guess is it's not easy to heat and cool something like that. I had a couple interesting details that I saw for the first time today. I was watching Jake Bruton's air sealing and his air control layer presentation, and he sometimes uses the sealing with a surface cavity under it as the air barrier. So there's tape sheathing or a European-style membrane on top of the ceiling joist, and then that's the air barrier for the house, which makes it a lot easier, and then you pile insulation on top of that. But in order to air seal around plumbing penetrations, when he does that, he uses the pipe boot that would ordinarily go up on the roof to flash it, and he puts that on top of the air barrier, and then there's a perfect air seal around the pipe. And I was just like, God, that's smart.
It's genius.
It's genius.
Yeah.
The other diabolical thing he does is I saw he had a number of line sets coming out of the house, and for folks who aren't familiar, those are the refrigeration lines and the control wiring for a heat pump. And instead of having all these wacky pipes and wires coming out of the building, he does that and then puts a box with a little tiny roof over it so you don't see any of that. And I was just like, God, that looks so good. And it was like made from what looked like were scraps of decking. And it was probably like 6 inches or 5.5 inches deep, which is all you need to accommodate those refrigeration lines and line sets. And I was like, God, that's the great things you learn at these things.
Well, and it's not an expensive detail.
Right.
Doesn't cost a ton of money. It just takes a little bit of thought and a few minutes, and you're ensuring the performance of your house.
I've always come away from Jake's presentations thinking he didn't have to think that much more. It was just a little bit, just a little bit more thinking and planning around those kinds of things can yield massive results, disproportionate results.
Agreed. Yeah, I thought that was super cool. Were there any details you guys saw that jumped out at you? I should have asked you ahead of the show instead of dropping this bomb on you.
All of them.
I did take a bunch of notes. I thought also with Jake's presentation, I'm going to look into this more, but the fact that roofing manufacturers recommend you don't use nail guns, you hand nail shingles. I wanted to dig into that a little more.
You're never going to convince me that's a good idea. I'm sorry.
All of the, he mentioned the OD plumbing boxes as well. Seemed like a really cool.
So this is a thing that goes in a concrete slab, right? And then allows you to punch the mechanicals or the pipes up through the floor.
Yeah.
And it was like you said, it was $8 or $10. That did seem smart. Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels like there's so many things that are out there that you just don't know about because who sits and reads the entire catalog? You just do what you've seen other people do.
And that's not an air sealing product. That's a plumbing product.
Yeah.
If you're a GC, plumber's gonna have to show you that unless you learn about it here.
Or the sealant used for your gaskets, you get that at the drywall supplier.
Yep. Did you guys know that there was going to be 10 mil poly required under your concrete slabs in 2021's ICC
What
code?
an emotional roller coaster. And then they're going to tear it away from us?
Yeah. Yeah, come on. 2021 to 2024, yeah, we've got 10 mil, but then 2024, we're back to 6.
Yeah.
The one thing I found interesting in 2021 code requires continuous exterior insulation in climate zone 4 and above, or 5 and above, rather. So, if that's enforced, that's a game-changing thing for everybody in a cold climate.
Do you think it's a good idea?
No. It's a good idea
Silence
to
says
use
everything.
exterior insulation. I'll agree with that, 100%. To force everybody into it without them knowing and without inspection departments knowing what they're looking at is a bad idea. I think without proper planning, you get piss poor performance.
It seems well-intentioned, but it has some pitfalls.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, yeah.
What do you all think about the continuous insulation requirements? Yeah, you're a fan? Joe and Travis, yeah?
Yeah, so I think it leads towards everybody doing better. But like at home in KC, most of the municipalities will probably exclude it. So they can pick up as much as they want or drop as much as they want. So when it becomes really hard or it's like that Spanglish to us, they're not gonna implement. Back a couple questions ago though, what I was thinking is the first one Joe was saying we had code officials at, right? I haven't seen any code officials the last 3 I've been to. So how do we bring more of them in without them feel like they're gonna get picked on the entire time or beat up? But Glenn's here to protect them. So, but anyway, point being is how do we get more of them in? Talking to 2 of my inspectors yesterday, they had 25 plus inspections yesterday alone. Who sees more people than them on a daily? that could help us increase that 1% improvement over, let's say, production builds or over the general public per se, than a code official or someone like that. But we do have to get them to care because they're probably overworked, underpaid, and don't have enough people. Hi, Dan. You're cute. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. I think you're totally right about that. You know, they not only have to enforce the rules, sometimes I'm sure it's not comfortable for anybody, but you can also be an educator, right? You can explain the why to your builder that you're on their site, and I think that would get a lot of traction.
Or at least ask a question, make some like brain go. I'm sure from the city side, they can't say I need you or what do you think about doing this? Because it's probably a liability from a government standpoint, right? But ask the question why. What if we did it this way? What do you think about that? See you next inspection.
Brandon was just saying that, you know, he can ask the inspector can ask the builder the question, what do you think about this way? And it's less confrontational and it's
Liability for the municipality.
What were you going to say?
Oh, I actually nothing, but now that I have the microphone back in front of my mouth, I was actually dealing with this very issue earlier this week where it's a relatively small municipality, and the builder told me that the inspector wouldn't inspect the framing until we had gun foam between the sheathing joints on the interior of the interior face of the sheathing.
So the horizontal joints, he wanted you to spray foam.
Exactly, yeah. I guess he wanted to see an air seal there. And I thought, this is really interesting because on one hand, that inspector is showing an interest and a care for an air sealing detail. But on the other hand, why on earth should that hold up a framing inspection? And I guess, you know, he's thinking, okay, well, once the insulation goes in, that's going to obscure that joint, and I don't want to pull it out to verify it and everything else. But, but to have educated that inspector on what the air barrier really is would have focused his care into a more practical, way, right? Another thing that he called out was, that air barrier behind the bathtub insert needs to go all the way up to contact the tile backer board. It was one of those knee height, tub inserts, and they were going to have tile from there up. Well, the problem was there was a 2x4 on the flat nailed to the studs as a ledger, so we would have had to somehow origami the air barrier around that ledger and snake it between the insert, which is already installed in our way, to then meet up with the tile backer board and join up with that. And so it's like this. It's like you're almost there. Like you see that there's something going on here, but yet what you're asking for doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, I agree. Getting the inspectors here would go a long way because, yeah, like as Glenn shared with us today, the codes are incorporating more and more and more of that building science kind of stuff. And we've got a lot of guys that are, moving into code enforcement from a background in the trades who have, quote unquote, always done it this way and may not be aware of the nuances of the difference between a vapor barrier and an air barrier, for example. Like one of the things that Ben Bogie said yesterday was that we need to be very clear in our terminology. An air barrier does not equal a vapor barrier, and a vapor barrier does not equal a vapor retarder, right? These are three different things, and they all, accomplish three different purposes in your building. So, thankfully, I'm someone who feels like has a pretty decent relationship with the code officials in my area. And I feel like I could probably reach out to them and say, hey, we've got this really cool event coming up. I mean, I know you're busy. I know you've got inspections to perform, but would you consider coming to this? And I bet some of them would, even if they couldn't practically make it, would want to, right? And so it really is just as simple as that. Brandon, next year, I'm going to reach out to the city of Chattanooga, the county of Hamilton, and then surrounding municipalities and say, hey guys, what would you think about coming to this thing? And see what we can do.
They could learn so much. They could learn so much.
And it would help them with their process too. It would help them with their inspections because now they know what they're looking at. Now they know what that language in the code really is trying to drive at and why it's there. And that would be a good thing for everybody.
And their budgets are tight, so maybe they get free admission. Looking at you, Travis.
Yeah.
I,
Record the whole thing, not just this podcast, but the whole thing, or something that they could, if they can't get off work, just during business hours or otherwise.
Brandon, one of our attendees, is saying that we should record these so folks can watch them at a later date at on their own schedule, which is a fantastic idea.
Brandon Jones.
We still have stuff to give away.
Maybe we should clarify, these are not gift cards for Tyvek. They are gift cards to Walmart with a Tyvek sticker on them.
You get 3/8 of a roll of Tyvek.
That's so funny.
Good point, Andy. Thank you.
I think one of the other takeaways on that same subject is that building science is a science, and so there's testing and learning and trying new things, and every build gets a little bit better. And I feel like code officials want to see things done to code, but they really want to see somebody who's engaged and thinking about why they're doing the things they're doing, which is exactly what we've been doing for the last 2 days.
I wanted to ask Allison his thoughts of candles, but he's walking away right now. But when he comes back, I'm going to try and. So Allison spent an hour. You have a question, sir?
Joel Lubell, step right on down.
So you were talking about how to make this more mainstream for homeowners, builders, all that kind of stuff. And the stuff I find the most interesting sometimes hearing about this is the building science investigation stuff that Peter Yost talks about and Steve Basic talks about. Also, I'm an Instagram nut, following most of the people in here. Where is the high production value TV show about building science that shows that aspect of how interesting this stuff can be? And not only that, shows how interesting our profession is and how much fun it is. You get a little bit of that from some of these legacy programs that are on TV, but the building science of it really could have that. And so pitch me or pitch somebody that show.
Coming to you next year from Fine Homebuilding, it's Building Science Adventures.
Yeah. So there actually is a TV show with a building science focus. And it's on PBS, and it's called Home Diagnosis. And it features Corbett and Grace Lunsford of Atlanta, Georgia. Corbett and Grace are pretty
This must not be in all
individuals.
markets, because I've never even heard of this show.
Well, so you can catch it on YouTube as well.
Okay.
If you
Can
follow,
you plug the name again, please?
Yeah, so if you look on YouTube, I think Corbett's under Home Performance. If you look up that channel, and you can find whatever links and such that he provides on that. But it's actually really interesting stuff. They go around the country and they test homes and they talk about why is this house not working and what can we do better and what needs to happen here. They also get into the chemistry of the indoor environment, which is really fascinating as well. And it's something that is it hosted by twin brothers? No. No. Corbett and Grace are husband and wife.
I just got that joke.
Yeah, that's true. No, Corbett does not hit things with sledgehammers, although I'm sure he wants to sometimes. But anyway, Home Diagnosis is the name of the show. It's on PBS, and you can find them online at Home Performance on both Instagram and YouTube.
Another question over there? No. So Allison was talking about the many things that can affect your indoor air quality. And while he's giving this presentation that's about, an hour long.
Yeah.
The whole time we're sitting at this table with this smoky candle burning. And anyone who's followed building science knows that that's a problem for indoor air quality. And sometimes it's so bad that the smoke accumulates as what is called ghosting on the framing members because of thermal bridging, right? And anyone who's into candles or cigars could probably see that on their walls, right? The candle's gone, fortunately.
The other thing that does is it freaks homeowners out when all of their HVAC air filters turn black and they wonder, oh my goodness,
Mold.
is this mold? What's going on here? Yeah. No, it's all those candles you're burning.
Just too moody.
Yeah.
So, does anyone have any? Yeah.
Thanks, fellas. I have an anecdote for smoking indoors. We recently went through a deep energy retrofit on our personal house, and the contractor that did all the main trades of the work, he said when he started construction back in the 70s, early 80s, it was customary to hand the new homeowners a box of cigars to smoke to help get rid of all of the new construction smell inside of the house. And so, yeah, what are VOCs was the question from the crowd. And that's kind of my wife and I's first adventure into third-hand smoke, which was like the layer of goo on the inside of the house after all of them smoked those cigars. So just kind of encapsulating all of the VOCs and other nasties that happened inside the brand new house.
That's awesome.
Shellac.
Yeah, I've been in a lot of homes lately where, maybe it's the cigar, maybe it's the wood-burning fireplace, or it's the candles, but it's like, the poor man's thermal camera that's going to stick to all those cold spots in your ceiling or your walls and show you exactly where all of your insulation is messed up.
So we never used the wood stove in my outbuilding very much prior to COVID, but then my outbuilding became my recording studio and my office, and I used the wood stove a lot, owing to also a number of fallen trees that became cordwood. But I was horrified just recently when I cleaned the window for the first time in a year and a half. It was disgustingly coated with this black film, and I know that's what it was. So. Yeah. There's also a similar coating in my lungs, I'm guessing. Questions? Got more stuff still? We're going to make you all stay here until we give all this stuff away. All right, here we go. I got two folks.
So over the last couple days, Dan Edelman I'm just a building science dork. I also work for Rockwell Insulation. But I feel like the industry has a different tone when it comes to vapor permeable insulation. Mainly with air infiltration with the product. And I feel like a lot of the vapor monsters that we talked about the last couple days really affects certain insulations. But when you look at like a cellulose, a rock wool, cross-directional fibers, things like that, I feel like it's a different animal than the traditional insulation that everybody is familiar with. So I want to know, Nathan, what your feeling is on, you're a big fiberglass installer, but like what's your feeling on vapor permeable insulation versus vapor impermeable insulations when it comes to vapor?
Well, let me ask you this. Is there anything in particular that I could go several different directions. What is there anything in particular that you're asking, or is it just kind of an open-ended question?
It's open-ended, but also air infiltration through different fibrous insulations.
Okay, so vapor. I think in this sense, you can use the concepts of vapor permeable and air permeable as synonyms when it comes to fibrous versus non-fibrous, i.e. foam insulations, right? And so really it just has a matter of, it's a matter of knowing when and where to put them. So you can't hold a fiber insulation accountable for your air barrier. Yeah, it's never going to be that, like you said. Meanwhile, you've got to be strategic with where you put your air impermeable insulation. And so there's a place for both, right? People often ask me, when are you going to get into spray foam? And why aren't you into spray foam and all this kind of a thing? And the answer is just that, for us personally, there are times when nothing else will work, okay? And in those times, you need an air impermeable insulation, okay? But every other time, you might not need it. And so for me, in a primarily fiberglass-dominated market, it just doesn't make sense for me to invest the money in the equipment to install that. I can accomplish what I need to accomplish in select portions of the house with rigid foam insulation, but I need to know where that makes sense and where it doesn't. And where it doesn't make sense, I can't ask fibrous insulation to be airtight. That was never part of its role. And so as long as you're providing the right air barrier alongside that fibrous insulation, you can get the R value that you want. I hear it often. Well, spray foam is the better insulation. Better for what? What are you trying to accomplish? What are the
It
goals?
has the better marketing.
It does. It does. It has the power of the petroleum industry behind it. Let's be honest. But ultimately, it has a lot to do with knowing what is your goal, what are the risks, what are the outcomes that you're looking for, what's the assembly, and factoring all of that into your selection. Go for it.
So I don't build new houses. I work in existing homes, and a lot of my work is inspecting existing homes. And there's a. So I do pest control for a living. I'm here with Jared, who inspects homes for real estate transactions. So we recognize the value of already existing homes, the home that's already built, that carbon's already been embodied and all that. For something like that, as we retrofit those and as we build new homes, how do we allow for future inspection of things like the box sill, the attic, where there may be problems in the future? Or are we just going to end up doing, drywall and cutting open insulation to inspect these things 10, 20 years from now?
Patrick always says drywall's cheap, so...
So Dan and I was talking about this earlier this morning, and he was talking about a lot of crawl spaces in this area, a lot of termites in this area. You need to periodically look for inspection tunnels, and if you coat the interior of your crawl space with foam insulation all the way up to the framing, that provision is lost. So he was suggesting that maybe flaps of insulation that are taped together that can be pulled down and then put back, so he can do his work, protect the home from termites without destroying the insulation barrier. And I think it's a point that illustrates so much of trade work is in a silo. You don't think about what comes next or who has going to have put their hands on this. So I think we all need to do a better job of a holistic approach to building and maintaining homes.
Well, it's like that also talks about resiliency. If you want a building to last for 200 years, people are going to change how they live in it, how they work in it, and they'll need to replace things and fix things, and making sure that's possible without deconstructing the whole building is super important. And I think goes along with that sort of inspection approach.
For a specific detail for that, I was talking to someone yesterday, and we talked about running a sill plate that sticks to the interior of the crawl space, so you can insulate the crawl space wall, skip the sill plate, get into the band joist.
That's such an easy answer.
But I can't take credit for that. I think it was him, maybe.
What a great answer.
But in a renovation situation, you could extend the sill plate into the crawl space and still keep an inspection.
Well, and even if you had an existing house, you could add to it.
Yeah, exactly.
You could just screw a additional, 1x2 or 2x2.
Yeah.
So Dan Heckman, who just asked that question, is super knowledgeable on the properties of the pests in question. And the sill plate detail, Andy, that you just described is something that Joel Lubell, that asked another question, was asking about yesterday as well. And I told Joel, hey, you need to get with Dan to make sure that that's cool, because, you could extend that. Let's say you've got an 8-inch CMU. Maybe if you use a 2x10 sill plate, you could cantilever that inward, bring your foam insulation up to that, and that gives you a nice termination for your insulation barrier. But what does that mean for termites, right? Andy, what termite zone are you in? Do you know?
I don't know the exact zone. I do know we have to leave inspection gaps for termites, yeah.
Yeah. Now, we do too here. In our county that we're in right now, which is on the southern border of Tennessee, we are in the, quote, heavy infestation zone. About 4 miles behind where I'm sitting right now is the state line of Georgia, and they are considered the, quote, very heavy infestation.
I hope someone told the termites, because,
they've got a contract. They know.
Yeah.
But all that to say, Dan, I'd like to get you up here to talk about this. Can you answer Joel's question on the Fine Homebuilding podcast about, is it a good idea? No, sorry, I mean Dan Heckman, sorry. He's the pest
Any
guy.
other Dans want to come in and address this?
Can you answer the question? I'd like to hear from Dan about, Is it a good idea, if you have a conditioned crawl space with spray foam on your foundation walls, to cantilever that sill plate inward to create a termination point for that foam? Yes or no? And if no, what can you do to make that safe? And why does it matter and all that stuff, man? Go.
So I would say it certainly helps, right, to be able to do a visual inspection, to pull a moisture reading off of that wood, and to be able to probe it mechanically.
Which you can't do if it's concealed by 2 inches of spray foam very well,
right? If it's completely hidden, then we can't do that unless we destroy something on the way. Part of this is our current attitudes towards pre-treatment and preventative treatment, and how we handle, especially in real estate, inspections. And I think that my industry, the pest control industry, has a long ways to go in terms of public acceptance of preventative treatments and warranties and paying for that service up front. And the pest control industry has a long ways to go in terms of accepting some responsibility for things that we might not be able to see. And what can we do ahead of time to prevent that? And what can we get our building inspectors to mandate while the homes are being built to prevent that sort of stuff? And that's certainly an area where we need to make progress. But the short answer is the more we can see, the better it is, and the more likely it is that problems are going to get caught early on.
So what's the danger of having spray foam in a foundation wall when it comes to termites?
So in this area, we have a lot of subterranean termites, which will tunnel right through spray foam. It's a great habitat for them, and they'll bring moisture up with them. And oftentimes, we can't see them. You know, if you've got a few inches of spray foam, you'll have a colony in there, and you'll have 1/8 of an inch of mud poking out. And if we're not paying really close attention, we might not see that. And if that connects to our framing, they can do a lot of damage to that framing before we can see anything.
Okay, so if you cantilever that sill plate across the top of your block inward to your foundation and then spray foamed up to that, you've now created an opportunity for them to get behind that foam and up into that framing.
Right, whereas a more traditional metal flashing, both as a capillary break and a termite shield, it's going to, if it doesn't have holes in it, force them out, either out to the siding or out into the crawl space area in order to get around and get to that wood.
There you go.
I'm going to ask Dan to be on Pro Talk while we're here so he can't say no.
Yeah.
What a great time.
Fantastic 2 days.
Thanks so much, y'all, for being here. It has been a pleasure to spend this time with you. I think our sponsors were amazing and knowledgeable and helpful. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks very much for listening. Please send your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Y'all. Pleasure and an honor.